The lifeguard chair was fake. The beach sand was fake. The little sign that said, "Reed Family Resort, guests must provide their own ocean," was definitely fake. But the county tourism inspector standing in my front yard with a clipboard was very real, and so was the look on Mrs. Carlton's face when he said, "Technically, this qualifies as a decorative seasonal hospitality display." Mrs. Carlton blinked behind her oversized sunglasses. "It is a beach resort." I adjusted the striped towel over my shoulder. "A very small one." "It is in his front yard," she snapped. The inspector looked around at the white, sand-colored pavers, the 2 approved palm planters, the wooden cabana frame, the tiny towel station, and the perfectly centered patio umbrella that started this entire disaster. Then he shrugged. "Still decorative." Mrs. Carlton's lips trembled like she was trying to hold back a scream that had a Homeowners Association logo on it. From my porch, my neighbor Gary lifted a plastic coconut cup and whispered, "Vacation law." I turned toward the little camera by my door and smiled. If you're watching Sovereign Verdict, subscribe now, because this is what happens when an HOA Karen bans a man's cheap patio umbrella and accidentally inspires a front yard beach resort. My name is Nolan Reed, and I did not buy that umbrella to make a statement. I bought it because my daughter needed shade. Lily was 9, pale as printer paper, and recovering from a rough summer of hospital visits after a skin condition made direct sun painful for her. Nothing life-ending, thank God, but enough to make outdoor time complicated. She loved drawing outside, especially chalk drawings on the driveway, but after 10 minutes in the sun, her cheeks would turn red and she'd retreat indoors, disappointed but pretending she was fine. So, I bought a patio umbrella. Not a luxury umbrella. Not one of those resort-grade things with teak poles and a price tag that requires financing, just a blue and white striped umbrella from a discount store. It tilted, it opened, it cast shade, and it let Lily sit in the driveway with her chalk again. For a week, it was perfect. She drew whales, castles, mermaids, and one very emotional crab. I sat beside her in a lawn chair, drinking coffee, and pretending not to get emotionally destroyed every time she said, "Dad, look," because for months I had been watching her miss ordinary childhood things. Ordinary things matter more when a doctor has to explain them. Then Mrs. Vanessa Carlton saw the umbrella. Mrs. Carlton was the president of the Seabrook Pines HOA and chair of the Outdoor Elegance Committee. That was the real title. Outdoor Elegance. She wore linen blazers, white sandals, and a sun hat so wide it looked like it had its own zoning district. She drove a cream-colored golf cart with a small brass bell on the steering wheel, which she rang whenever she wanted someone's attention. She rang it at 8:30 on a Saturday morning. I was kneeling beside Lily, helping her color a giant blue whale, when the bell chimed twice. Ding, ding. Lily looked up. "Is that an ice cream cart?" "Worse," I said quietly. "Government." Mrs. Carlton stepped out of her golf cart and stared at the umbrella like it had crawled out of a swamp. "Mr. Reed," she said, "we need to discuss this discount canopy." I stood. "It's an umbrella." "It is a temporary shade device of visibly low quality." Lily hugged her chalk bucket. I kept my voice calm. "It gives my daughter shade." Mrs. Carlton glanced at Lily, then back at me. "Shade is not the issue. Appearance is the issue." That was the moment I should have known where this was going. She opened her leather folder and removed a violation notice. Section 10, Paragraph C prohibits cheap, mismatched, beach-style promotional plastic or discount patio umbrellas visible from the street. Outdoor shade features must be neutral, market grade, consistent with the coastal luxury identity of Seabrook Pines. Coastal luxury identity, I repeated. We are 40 miles from the coast. She ignored that. You have 48 hours to remove the umbrella or replace it with an approved shade structure from the association's preferred vendor list. I looked at the paper. The cheapest approved umbrella on that list is probably $800 and $940, she said. But standards require investment. Lily's voice was small. Dad, do we have to put it away? Mrs. Carlton smiled politely, the kind of smile people use when they want cruelty to look civilized. Rules are not personal, dear. I felt my jaw tighten. The umbrella cost $39. It was not elegant. It was not luxury. But under that umbrella, my daughter could draw whales in the sunlight without pain. Under that umbrella, she got to feel normal. Mrs. Carlton handed me the notice. Remove it by Monday, she said. Otherwise, the fine begins at $700. She rang her little golf cart bell once before driving away. Ding. Lily stared at the chalk whale on the driveway. The blue looked brighter than the sky. Dad, she whispered, is my umbrella ugly? That question hit harder than the fine. I folded the violation notice and put it in my pocket. No, I said. It just needs a better story. Because Mrs. Carlton had made one terrible mistake. She had banned a beach-style umbrella, but she had not banned a beach. That night, after Lily went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with the violation notice, the HOA rule book, and a level of quiet determination usually reserved for people defusing bombs. The blue and white umbrella was folded in the garage like a suspect in protective custody. Lily had asked twice if we were going to throw it away. I told her no. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't fully believe me. Children can hear uncertainty even when adults try to wrap it in confidence. I opened the Seabrook Pines Community Standards and found Section 10, Paragraph C. Mrs. Carlton had quoted the umbrella rule correctly. Cheap, mismatched, beach style, promotional, plastic, or discount patio umbrellas visible from the street were prohibited. The wording was so judgmental, I could almost hear her voice inside it. But then I noticed the next paragraph. Seasonal decorative displays, hospitality-themed landscape features, and approved lifestyle installations may include umbrellas, cabanas, shade sails, loungers, decorative sand tone hardscape, coastal props, and related visual elements when presented as a cohesive theme and maintained in good condition. I stared at that sentence. Then I read it again. Beach-style umbrella alone? Banned. Beach resort theme with umbrella included? Possibly allowed. The rule was ridiculous, but it was also clear. Mrs. Carlton did not hate umbrellas. She hated poor people umbrellas. But if the same umbrella became part of a cohesive hospitality-themed lifestyle installation, then suddenly it had a pathway to approval. I whispered, "You have got to be kidding me." From the hallway, Lily called, "Dad?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Go to sleep." I kept reading. Seasonal displays could remain up for 30 days if they did not obstruct sidewalks, create safety hazards, use loose sand, or include unapproved lighting. Decorative hardscape could be installed with pavers or contained materials. Artificial palm planters were allowed if under 6 feet. Freestanding cabana frames were allowed if decorative, and not used for overnight occupancy. Overnight occupancy. Someone in Seabrook Pines had clearly tested boundaries before me. The next morning, I called my brother Miles, who had once built a pirate ship bed for his son that was so elaborate the room technically became maritime property. "I need help building a fake beach resort in my front yard," I said. There was a pause. "Is this about the HOA?" "Yes." "Is there a child involved?" "Yes." "Then I'm bringing tools." By Friday evening, Miles, Lily, and I had a plan. No real sand, because the rules banned loose sand. We used sand-colored rubber pavers instead, the kind meant for playgrounds. We built a small white cabana frame over part of the driveway, freestanding and temporary. We added 2 artificial palm planters under the height limit. We placed a little towel rack, a decorative wooden sign, and 1 narrow lounge chair that nobody was actually allowed to nap in because I was not trying to create evidence. And in the center, we placed the blue and white umbrella. Suddenly, it did not look cheap. It looked intentional. Lily helped paint the sign. She worked slowly, tongue sticking out in concentration, choosing bright teal letters for the words Reed Family Resort. Underneath, in smaller letters, I added, "Guests must provide their own ocean." She laughed when she saw it. That laugh alone was worth whatever came next. On Sunday afternoon, I submitted the display through the HOA portal as a seasonal hospitality-themed landscape feature. I attached photos, measurements, safety notes, and the exact rule allowing cabanas, umbrellas, coastal props, and sand-tone hardscape as part of a cohesive theme. Mrs. Carlton denied it in 14 minutes. Reason: display appears unserious. I leaned back from my laptop. Unserious. That was not a safety concern. That was not a design violation. That was Mrs. Carlton realizing the rule book had turned on her and trying to reject joy on vibes. So I appealed. Monday morning arrived bright and hot. Lily sat under the umbrella, drawing a seashell city in chalk, while I tightened 1 last bolt on the cabana frame. The fake resort looked absurd, cheerful, clean, and completely within the written limits. At 9:03, I heard the bell. Ding, ding. Mrs. Carlton's cream golf cart rolled to the curb. She stepped out wearing a white linen suit and sunglasses large enough to hide a crime scene. She stared at the front yard. The cabana, the palms, the towel station, the sign, the umbrella. Her hand slowly rose to her mouth. "Mr. Reed," she said, voice trembling, "why is there a resort on your driveway?" Lily whispered, "It's not on the driveway. It's beach adjacent." I almost lost it. Mrs. Carlton turned toward me. "You were ordered to remove the cheap umbrella." "I did not leave it as a cheap umbrella," I said. "I incorporated it into a seasonal hospitality-themed landscape feature." She looked physically pained. "That is not what the rule means." "It is what the rule says." Her golf cart bell swung slightly in the breeze. Ding, ding, and for the first time, Mrs. Carlton did not look elegant. She looked trapped under her own coastal luxury identity. Mrs. Carlton stood at the curb with one hand on her golf cart bell and the other pressed against her chest, as if the fake beach resort had personally insulted her bloodline. The morning sun hit the sand-colored pavers, making them glow like a tiny vacation brochure. The blue and white umbrella stood proudly in the middle. No longer a lonely discount canopy, but the centerpiece of a carefully arranged front yard paradise. The cabana frame cast a soft shadow over Lily's chalk drawings. The artificial palms swayed slightly in the breeze, even though they were plastic and had no right to look that relaxed. Mrs. Carlton pointed at the sign. "Reed Family Resort?" Lily looked up from her chalk. Guests must provide their own ocean. Gary, who had appeared on the sidewalk with a coffee mug, whispered, "Strict but fair." Mrs. Carlton snapped her gaze toward him. "This is not a public attraction." "No," I said. "It's a seasonal hospitality-themed landscape feature." She looked at me with pure hatred for those words. "You are exploiting a decorative exception." "I am following the written standard. The rule was intended for tasteful coastal displays." I gestured at the cabana, the palms, the pavers, the towel rack, and the umbrella. "Coastal? It is childish." I looked at Lily. She stopped drawing. That tiny pause changed everything. Mrs. Carlton noticed, but she did not soften. People like her never realize when they have stepped on something fragile. They just keep walking and complain about the sound. I kept my voice calm. "The appeal process is still open." "The board will hold an emergency review tonight," she said. 7 o'clock, clubhouse. You will remove this display immediately afterward." "That sounds like you've already decided." "I know a violation when I see one." I smiled. "And I know a paragraph when I read one." Her lips tightened. She turned, climbed into her golf cart, and rang the bell once before driving away. Ding. Lily watched her go, then looked at me. "Dad, is she going to make us take it down?" I crouched beside her. "Not if the rules say we can keep it. What if she ignores the rules? Then we bring bigger rules." That afternoon, I prepared the folder. I printed Section 10, Paragraph C, the umbrella ban. Then I printed the very next paragraph allowing seasonal decorative displays, hospitality-themed landscape features, cabanas, umbrellas, coastal props, artificial palms, and sand tone hardscape. I printed the denial email that said the display appears unserious. I highlighted the fact that unserious was not a safety category, not a material category, not a visibility category, and not an actual rule. Then I printed photos. The umbrella alone looked cheap, I admitted that. But inside the resort display, it looked cheerful and intentional. The whole setup was clean, temporary, measured, and safe. No loose sand, no lights, no sidewalk obstruction, no overnight use, no public access, nothing that violated the written limits. Miles came over at 5 to help me straighten the towel rack. "You know," he said, "this is the first HOA dispute I've seen where the evidence includes a palm tree that came in a box. Justice comes in many forms." He nodded. "Mostly plastic today." At 6:50, I walked into the Seabrook Pines clubhouse with my folder under one arm. I did not bring Lily. She wanted to come, but I told her this was boring adult paperwork. The truth was, I did not want her sitting in a room while Mrs. Carlton talked about her shade like it was contamination. The room was packed. Apparently, Front Yard Resort hearing had traveled through the neighborhood faster than an actual storm warning. Residents filled the folding chairs. A few had clearly come straight from dinner. Gary sat in the front row wearing sunglasses and a Hawaiian shirt. I stared at him. He shrugged. "Theme support," Mrs. Carlton sat at the board table in a pale blue blazer and white pearls, looking like she had dressed as the human form of coastal luxury. Beside her sat 3 board members: Patricia, who looked nervous, Helen, who looked amused, and Martin, who was scrolling through photos on his phone with a badly hidden smile. Mrs. Carlton banged the gavel. "This emergency session concerns Lot 28, owned by Mr. Nolan Reed, who has responded to a simple umbrella violation by constructing a mock resort in his front yard." I stepped to the podium. She leaned forward. "Mr. Reed, explain why this board should allow a childish beach display to remain in a luxury residential community." I opened my folder. "Because your rules allow seasonal hospitality-themed landscape features." She immediately interrupted. "That provision was never intended to protect this kind of stunt. The rule allows cabanas, umbrellas, coastal props, artificial palm planters, and sand tone hardscape when presented as a cohesive theme." Martin looked at the highlighted page. "It does say that." Mrs. Carlton shot him a look. "The display must be tasteful." "That word is not in the paragraph," I said. Helen leaned forward, smiling faintly. "Actually, he's right. The word tasteful is in the fountain section, not the seasonal display section." Gary whispered, "Fountain law differs from beach law." A few people laughed. Mrs. Carlton banged the gavel. "Order," I continued. "The original umbrella was there because my daughter needs shade. She has a medical skin condition that makes direct sunlight painful. I bought a cheap umbrella because it worked. When Mrs. Carlton called it low quality and demanded removal, I used the written display rule to create a temporary, clean, safe, themed installation around it." The room quieted. Mrs. Carlton stiffened. "No one objected to your daughter having shade. You objected to the shade I could afford." That line landed. Patricia, the nervous board member, looked down at the documents. Helen stopped smiling. Even Martin put his phone down. Mrs. Carlton's face flushed. "This association has preferred vendors for a reason." "Yes," I said. "The cheapest approved umbrella was $940. Mine was $39. Under it, my daughter got to draw outside again." The clubhouse doors opened. Miles walked in, carrying Lily's chalk drawing board. On it was the giant blue whale she had drawn under the umbrella, with tiny words written beneath it in purple chalk. "My Shade Beach." Mrs. Carlton closed her eyes. Gary whispered, "The whale has entered evidence." And suddenly, the hearing was no longer about a cheap umbrella. It was about who gets to decide whether a child's comfort has to look expensive. Miles walked to the front of the clubhouse carrying Lily's chalkboard like it was a piece of courtroom evidence. The drawing was simple. A giant blue whale, smiling under a striped umbrella with yellow chalk sunbeams around it and the words, "My Shade Beach," written at the bottom. It was not professional. It was not elegant. It was not part of any approved coastal luxury catalog. It was better than all of that. Mrs. Carlton stared at it like the whale had violated parking rules. Miles placed the board gently beside the podium. "Lily asked me to bring this. She said if people were talking about the umbrella, they should see what it was for." The room was completely silent. I took a breath and looked at the board. "That umbrella was never about decoration," I said. "It was about giving my daughter a place to sit outside without pain." The fake beach resort was ridiculous. Yes, I know that. But I built it because your rules banned a cheap umbrella by itself while allowing a themed hospitality display with umbrellas inside it. Helen leaned into her microphone. The display is temporary, correct? Yes. 30 days, as allowed. No loose sand? None. Rubber pavers? No lighting? No. No sidewalk obstruction? No. Martin looked at the photos. The umbrella is the same one from the original violation? Yes, I said. Same $39 umbrella, but now it is part of a cohesive theme. Gary whispered. Character development. Mrs. Carlton snapped. This is mockery. I turned toward her. No, Mrs. Carlton. Mockery would be pretending a $940 umbrella is the only acceptable way for a child to have shade. That one hit the room hard. Patricia, the nervous board member, looked down at Lily's drawing. Her voice softened. Does your daughter need shade for medical reasons? Yes. I can provide a doctor's note if required, but I was trying not to put her private health details into an HOA fight. Mrs. Carlton lifted her chin. Medical accommodation has a separate process. Then you should have offered that process before issuing a fine, Helen said. Mrs. Carlton turned sharply. Excuse me? Helen looked at her calmly. If a resident says the shade is for a child's health, we should not start with vendor lists and fines. The room murmured in agreement. Mrs. Carlton's fingers tightened around her pen. The issue remains, the front yard resort display. Then vote on the rule, I said, not the price tag. For a second, she had no answer. Martin picked up the highlighted rule page. The seasonal display provision does allow umbrellas, cabanas, coastal props, artificial palms, and sand tone hardscape as part of a cohesive hospitality-themed installation. Patricia nodded slowly. And the denial reason was, appears unserious. Helen looked at Mrs. Carlton. That's not enforceable language. Mrs. Carlton's face flushed. So now we are approving fake resorts? We are approving a temporary display that follows the written rule, Helen said. And we are avoiding punishing a father for finding affordable shade. Mrs. Carlton sat back, like the chair had betrayed her. Helen turned to the room. I move to rescind the fine against Lot 28 and approve the temporary Reed Family Resort display for 30 days under the seasonal hospitality-themed landscape feature provision, subject to no loose sand, no lighting, no sidewalk obstruction, and no extension without review. Martin raised his hand. Second. Mrs. Carlton whispered, Unbelievable. All in favor? Helen asked. Helen raised her hand. Martin raised his. Patricia hesitated, looked again at Lily's chalk whale, and raised hers too. 3 votes. Mrs. Carlton's hand stayed flat on the table. The motion passes, Helen said. The display is approved. The room applauded. Not wild applause, not a celebration of chaos. More like relief. Like people had watched common sense crawl out from under a pile of overpriced vendor catalogs and dust itself off. I looked at Lily's drawing and felt my throat tighten. 2 days later, the official email arrived. The fine was rescinded. The resort display was approved for 30 days. The board also included a note saying I could submit a medical accommodation request for a permanent shade solution without using the preferred vendor list. I printed that email and put it in the folder. Then I took Lily outside. She stood in the driveway under the blue and white umbrella, staring at the fake cabana, the little palm planters, the towel rack, and her chalk whale still visible near the edge. So the resort can stay? She asked. For 30 days. She smiled. That's a long vacation. It was. For the next month, Reed Family Resort became the happiest little absurdity in Seabrook Pines. Neighbors stopped by to compliment the sign. Kids asked if they could draw chalk shells near the edge of the driveway. Gary arrived one afternoon wearing sunglasses and carrying a plastic coconut cup, even though I'm almost certain it contained iced coffee. Mrs. Carlton drove past often. She never rang the bell. When the 30 days ended, Lily and I took everything down together. The palms went into the backyard. The cabana frame moved to the patio. The blue and white umbrella stayed, because the HOA approved my medical accommodation for a permanent shade area near the driveway. Not the $900 one. Ours. The cheap one. The one that worked. Sometimes victory is not about keeping the ridiculous thing forever. Sometimes it is about using the ridiculous thing long enough to make people admit the reasonable thing should have been allowed in the first place. And every time Lily sits under that umbrella now, drawing whales, crabs, castles, or whatever strange ocean creature lives in her imagination that week, I remember the real point. Shade should not have to be luxurious to matter. Comfort should not have to be expensive to count. And a child should never feel like her needs are ugly just because an HOA Karen prefers a vendor catalog. So remember this from Sovereign Verdict. Subscribe for more stories. Read every loophole. Protect your family's peace, and never let someone ban your umbrella unless they are ready for you to build the whole beach.